Hey there. So for this video, I'm just going to talk through some of the things I'm currently focusing on in my violin practice. I've been playing violin about 2.5 years. I just went and checked, and so it's been about 2.5 years, and definitely my progress has had its ups and downs. And right now I'm kind of leveling off too. I want to be consistent, but it's not always motivating to practice because violins can be a frustrating instrument. Anyway, so where I'm at right now, my focus in all the different things I'm practicing, my goal is to get it to where it's pitch perfect. And so, for an example of what I find so frustrating, here's me trying to play the C major scale, which is something I've been working on for a couple weeks. And that C is not right. It's just not quite right. That's wrong. Oh, that's wrong. So that's how a lot of my practice sessions start. I start with the C major scale. I used to start with the G major, and I usually play a little bit of the G major scale just to make sure I'm in tune. But that's the early part of a lot of my practice sessions lately. I've just been trying to get that C major scale down. And it's like, I learned the C major scale a long time ago, but it's the pitch perfect aspect to it. And part of, I think, what got me into the pickle I'm in that sense, is early on I didn't necessarily tune every time I practiced. So, if you're playing guitar, and you play when your guitar is not quite in tune, but it's fine, like it's not a big deal because the frets are still in the same spot. But with violin, it's like your guitar frets move if you're not in tune. So I've finally, for the last year or so, maybe 1.5 years, I made the choice to, it's kind of an obvious choice, but it didn't occur to me in the beginning to just every single time you pick up the instrument, you must tune. Like, you don't have a choice, you must tune. And part of the reason, I guess, that I didn't like tuning up was the Violin Tuner app I had on my phone wasn't the greatest app. And I actually took the plunge, maybe 1 year ago or something, I took the plunge of tuning with my piano, so tuning by ear. And I just kind of made it my choice. So I go by practice time, not how much stuff I get done. So I just made the choice. I'm just going to tune by ear, and however long it takes me, that's how long it takes me. So I'll sit down, and the first thing I'll do, I'll turn on my keyboard, and then I'll just play a G. See how good it is? And at first, and even now, sometimes I'm not even sure how much I trust my ear. So I might fiddle with the knobs a little, just to get it a little off, so that I recognize it more when it's on. I'll do the G. That high E one is the more likely one to be off a little bit. And if there's any, when the weather's kind of up and down and temperature changes and humidity's here and there, that's when it's likely to be just a little bit off, or a couple times I've had to completely retune the whole thing, and that's a big pain. And if my ear's not really giving me good feedback and I'm not sure what I'm hearing, I might, do a little bowing, because it sounds a little different bowed. So this one, that helps if I'm not sure what I'm doing. But so I think that's been the biggest, definitely the biggest thing where, okay, I'm on the right path now that I know that every time I sit down to play, it's going to be in tune because I'm going to put it in tune. Problem is that makes it a little less motivating to sit down and practice, because you can't just sit down and practice. One thing that helped me a lot to get into that motivated space where it's easier is keeping my violin out of its case. So I do have a little dust cover that I'll put over it, but instead of putting my violin in its case, I'll put it on top of the case. And that makes it a lot simpler to just pick it up and practice, though I do have to tune it. But anyway, so what I'm doing these days, in my practice routine, every other day that I practice, I will either do sheet music-based stuff or exercise-based stuff. So what I'm doing for sheet music-based stuff, I bought it's Hal Leonard. I forget what they call the particular series, but it's basically the standard Hal Leonard violin course. I have another book that I was using for lessons back when I was taking lessons, and then I bought the Hal Leonard, and I forget what the actual name of it is, but just a couple days ago I went back to the beginning of the book, because sometimes you're progressing forward and you're struggling, a little frustrated, and sometimes it's motivating and encouraging just to go back to the very beginning and just focus on perfect precision on every single note, which is what I'm doing now. And also because now I'm in the beginning of the book, I'm in the keys of D and G and stuff like that, which is a lot easier than some of these other ones that have notes that haven't become quite as ingrained in me yet. So I'll do that, and that's very helpful because I'll always do it with the recordings. So that book has recordings. Most good leading music education material comes with recordings. And that particular book has some that are ingrained in it. It's an online book, so I'll use my iPad. That's why I can't demonstrate it, because I'm recording with my iPad. But you just hit play. I think it just counts you in. It'd be like 4 beats on the metronome kind of thing. And then you're not just using your own ear based on relative pitch. You can, fit the pitch into the harmony. And so that way it helps because you can train your muscle memory based on more than just, okay, this sounds right within the scale. Because one problem that I noticed just in the last week or two that I noticed I would do is I noticed I was playing I don't know what key scale would have been, but I remember I was in the thinnest 2 strings and something like that, except it would come out where the last 2 notes would be something like, let's see if I can get something like it. Anyway, to the extent where these first 3 notes sounded right, or first 4 notes, and then the next note would sound flat, and that would be the open, the real note that I didn't fret, or I didn't push down on the fingerboard for. And so that's kind of when I began to realize that, particularly when I was on that second to the thinnest string, I was doing something very close to the appropriate notes in the major scale. It sounded right to me, but then when I got to the next note, it was just a little flat, meaning that I was close in the other ones, but not quite, and you only notice it when you get that absolute note. So that's where just practicing the scales without any accompaniment, it kind of gave me clues that I'm not quite as perfect as I would expect to be, where I think my ear is at. So anyway, that's part of why I think it's definitely very important for me. I think it's important for everyone to play with harmonies, with a track, for example. When you are playing, these are the notes you're playing, and if you're not playing those notes pitch perfect, there will be a little bit of dissonance, assuming you have a decent ear to be able to identify that. But so that's what I do. And then on the days that I do exercises, I have my list of exercises on my phone, like I do with every instrument, or most of the instruments I do. And I'll start off with, of course, I'll tune up by ear, which I think is very, I think that's going to be a help just to train my ear a little bit. What I wanted to get a bit to eventually is to be able to tune all my instruments by ear. But it's, so far, every once in a while when I try to tune guitar by ear, completely by ear, it's a little harder for some reason, probably just because I haven't done it as much. But anyway, so I'll start with scales, and right now what I'm doing, I was doing, starting with G and then D and then A. Now I've started beginning with C, and the reason for that, 2 reasons for that. Number 1 is because I realized that I don't have to always be looking at my phone if I can just memorize the circle of fifths, and the bottom of the circle of fifths, if I'm going G, D, A, well, the bottom of that is C, so I might as well just make it a little mathematically easier for myself and start with C. So start with C and then onto G, D, A, etc. And that's, then I can just know the circle of fifths. And the other reason I decided that it makes sense for me to start every day with the C major scale is because I came to identify C as a problem scale for me. And it's particularly that note C, because what makes the G major scale and the D major scale so perfect for beginners is that the first note is open, you know, or the D, the first note is open. So then you just get a whole step, another whole step. Very nice and simple. But other ones, like C and A and E flat and some of these other monster scales that we all hate, they don't start on an open string. So my problem with C is that I know how the C major scale goes in terms of if you gave me a diagram and told me to put a dot where each one goes, you know, or if you gave me a guitar fretboard type of thing and told me to put my fingers on the right frets. But of course there aren't frets and I can't get that C right predictably. I think that's right. There we go. And that's literally what I'll do. You know, I'll just take like 3 or 4 notes because I'll identify that the C wasn't right, so then I'll just do those 3 or 4 notes over and over until I feel better. And then I'll do the C major scale, and then I'll go with my other scales. And for each scale that I do, at this point what I do is I'll play the scale, and then I'll play, so I'll demonstrate with G because I'm more comfortable with it. I'll do the scale. And then I'll do this 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4 exercise. Oops. And I'll do that all the way up and all the way down. And a lot of the time I'll do that with, I think it's called slurred bowing, hooked bowing, whatever the word is, where you... that kind of thing. And I'm not very good at that. I know it's sloppy, and so I have mixed feelings about should I be doing that and kind of being sloppy and training myself to be sloppy, or should I decide, you know, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right kind of thing, and just don't do it except when I'm going to focus on it. I'm not sure about that. So I'll do that, and then I'll do this one. And I'll do that all the way up and all the way down. And then I'll do a major scale for that key. Or, I'm sorry, major arpeggio. Oops. Ah! So that's my current routine for each scale. And I'll do one major scale, and then I'll do the one before it in the circle of fifths. I'll do the minor scale for that. And since I added that, I tend to get fewer scales in. So, but I think it's worth it because I tend to play, like when I'm playing to play, I'll play minor. So I think it makes sense for me to learn the minor scales. And then plus, every time I learn let's say the C minor scale, I'm effectively practicing the E flat major scale. So there's an extent to which once I get further along, I'm going to be overlapping. So, you know, you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It's not wasting is kind of what I'm saying. I'm still getting my major scales in effectively because it's the relative minor. And the C minor is what I've been laboring over in the last week or 2. Getting better, but still very unconfident with that. I wouldn't be comfortable playing it, you know, and expecting it to be on key, you know, expecting notes to be on. So that's what I do with scales. I do those scales, those scale-based exercises, and then an arpeggio. And then I move on to the next one. And my goal isn't to learn the scale. I know all the scales in terms of knowing where the fingers are supposed to go in terms of a diagram. But my focus is trying to shore up the parts where I go like this. Oops. You know? That nasty stuff. So Actually, that didn't sound so bad. I think there's actually an exercise I've heard about music teachers who tell you to try to play wrong, and that'll help you learn how to play right. And maybe that's something I should try, because just a minute ago I actually found it harder to make it sound really horribly flat. I found it harder to do that on purpose than to do it on accident. And I've read on musician blogs that one actually helpful way to correct these kinds of really bad habits that you just can't stop, one helpful way to do it is a teacher will tell a student, okay, now I want you to do your bad habit as bad as you can. And a lot of the time the student will have difficulty with it. And they'll work at it until they can do the bad habit on purpose, and then they'll try to stop it, and it's much easier. So maybe I should try that with my pitch issues. Just try to be pitchy and then see if that helps. I don't know if it will or not. Being pitchy is not one problem. It's you can go any direction. It's a very amorphous, multi-problem. Then I'll do vibrato exercises, and I decided to try to learn vibrato, and so I went on YouTube and tried to find videos for how to do vibrato, and every instructor I found was giving a different method. So the method that I finally landed on, it was one of the first ones I found, and it's by far the simplest one, so I figured, well, I'll just try it, see if it works. It seems to be working, but it's taking a while, but they say whatever you do, it's going to take a while. So what this one was, the way they explained it, I think they said start off where you just hold it like this and you just kind of wave to yourself to get the muscle memory started. And then you do, I think they called it polishing the strings, where you just take all three of your main fingers and you just kind of go like this for each, next string and the next string. So you do it for all 4 strings, and you do that regularly. So I did that for a bit. And then the next step, which is where I'm at now, is where you just get them into more or less the position you want to practice them in. And ideally you'd be practicing up here, but I'm pretty sure this one actually had you starting in more or less first position, which is harder, apparently, and they recommend you always do it up here. So that's another reason that, okay, well, if this doesn't work, okay, well, I have been warned. So with this part of my practice routine, I just go up here with all 3 fingers and just do that. And then I'll do the 2 fingers. I'll do the 1 finger. And I try to do it, different speeds, and do it with the pressure, not without the pressure. You start off without the pressure just to get the motion going, and then you need to be able to do it with the pressure, or else it's not worth anything for you. Then I'll do the next string, and then the third string, and then the final string. So I do that, which is really boring. But I was almost ready to give up on it, because I'm like, things are so ambiguous on the internet in terms of what you should do, and everyone's saying you got to do it in 3rd or 4th position in order for it to be worth anything, or in order for it to get you anywhere as a beginner. But then I had some experiences where I was playing around just for fun, and I was up on those high strings, and I found myself able to do it almost like vibrato. So I can't do it on cue. That's about as best as I can do on cue. But compared to what I used to be able to try to do, that's not so bad. So that was my little motivation to say, okay, keep doing those vibrato exercises and do them every day. And so that's what I try to do now. I try to do them every day, or every other day. Every day that I do exercises, I do those, and I'll do the top string, and then I'll do some other exercise, and I'll do the next string. So that way it's not boring, and I'm not doing it all at once. A little more of an angle. So I do my major scales, mix those with the vibrato exercises, mix those with the natural minor scales. And then here the last 2 things are things that I try to do relatively consistently, and I'm still trying to decide what I want to prioritize, because with doing I never get all my scales done, so it's hard to say what I want to do consistently. But lately I've been trying to do a bit of the third position C major scale and just some quick work on double stops. So for double stops, what I'll do it first looking, just try to get the bowing for double stops. So I basically do this. And then I do it, same thing, but I stop looking. So hoping that my muscles will keep doing the same thing, you know, which is easier than just starting by not looking, because then you're just like, you know, you don't get anywhere. Whoops. So that kind of thing. And so where I'm at now, I can pretty much get it basically like I just demonstrated. That's about the extent to which I get it. But I couldn't do it without having started out looking. So I want to get to where I can do it. Because the thing is, if you're doing it with sheet music, like when I was taking lessons and I was going through books and my teacher would give me some classical pieces randomly from her collection. And when you're doing that, and you get a double stop, you're not going to be staring at the fingerboard while you're looking at the sheet music. You really need to be able to do it without trouble. And really, at that point, I couldn't even do it no matter what I was looking at, because it's just a very different motion. It's a very precise bowing motion. You know, when you're playing one particular string, you've got a bit of a range of motion. You can lean this far, and then you can lean almost to touching the next string. You've got a very good wiggle room there. But when you're doing double stops, if you do any wiggle room, then you start to favor one of the strings. And you definitely don't want that. So I usually take just a minute or so to run over double stops. And then I try to, at the very end, I'm like, okay, I'm out of time. Maybe my timer just went off. I'm like, okay, time to go. But let me just run over the third position C major scale, just because I just don't want to completely lose it. I mean, I used to be able to play a little bit in third position, and maybe it wasn't as good as I remember, because back then I think I just wasn't so concerned about being pitchy. I think I thought that if I just get the right notes, then eventually my pitchiness will just correct itself, because, you know, you just kind of gradually adapt and get better, which isn't particularly true. You need to be in tune, and you need to be perfecting that pitch, or else you will stay pitchy forever. That's how I see it right now. Yeah, I'm pretty confident in that based on what I've seen happen to me. So anyway, regardless, I want to do a little bit in third position, just so I'm doing something on it. So I'll get myself into third position. Usually I'll do that by playing a bit of a scale in open position. And then I'll slide down a little bit. And then I'll check my pitch by checking it with the open string. And then I'll play just a portion of that major scale in third position. And then I'll check my pitch again from the... And I'll just repeat that kind of thing over and over. And I might extend further into the scale, further up the scale, you know, some of the times and stuff like that. I might check my pitch on the D string. I always forget because I think it's the A string, because on the guitar the second string is the A string. So I always anyway. So that's basically my routine right now. Doing the sheet music based stuff is definitely an important part as well, and it's motivating as well, because you're actually playing real music. And the other motivating part that I do once in a while, this is more in the category of play, but that's where I just record a chord progression and play along with it. And lately that's for the last 6 months or so, that's been more discouraging than encouraging, just because that's when I discover, especially if I record it, that's when I discover how pitchy I am. And I discover that I actually kind of like electric guitar better than violin, just because with electric guitar, I'm not pitchy in the same way. I mean, I got my problems there too, but yeah. So definitely in the last 2 or 3 weeks, now that I've become more consistent, I decided to be a little more consistent with how many times per week I practice violin. That helps a lot, because back when I was doing 1 to 2 times a week, it doesn't carry over enough, and then it's really discouraging when you do pick it up and practice. So now I do it probably 4 times a week. So it's almost every weekday, counting Saturday as a weekday. So I feel like there was something else I was about to say related to what I'm currently working on. Oh yeah, I was going to say in the as I got toward the end of book 2 of the Hal Leonard book, they introduced harmonics, which I think is a good exercise. And this is something actually now it's good for me to remember this, because I can put it somewhere in my exercises, even though I went back to the beginning of book 1 to restart. But I want to keep doing this exercise that they introduced near the end of book 2, because I think it's going to be helpful moving toward being able to explore other positions. So this exercise, and also being able to play correct pitch without warming up first, which is just something I really, really want to get better at. But so this exercise, basically, you play a string open, and then you play it, if you put your finger, you know, like about to where the body of the instrument meets the fingerboard, you can get it doesn't seem to be working. There we go. So you get a nice clean octave. There we go. So the exercise that they introduced was where you would play with your finger in that position, and then you slide up. And then they make it a little more, you know, got to be intentional, because then they go. And you got to do that in time with the music. So that, I think, is going to be a really good exercise for training you to very quickly get into position and play whatever note it is. You know, so it's one thing if you've been playing the C major scale for 5-10 minutes already, and you say, I want to play this particular D note here, but your fingers know where they belong, because they've been playing notes that belong to that key and scale for a long time. But it's another thing if you're up here, and then you try to do it. And what tends to happen with some of us who aren't so good at that is we kind of go, you know, we kind of try to slide to it. And that's terrible, because if you do that when you're actually trying to play something for other people to hear, well, it just sounds really bad. And they can tell you're a really bad player. So I think that's going to be a helpful exercise. And then particularly for developing toward being able to switch positions. So I don't know what position that would be if you're in position to play the harmonic octave from the open string, but probably 4th position, 5th, I don't know. But at least, you know, you've got that ability to switch quickly, which is going to be important. And if we're going into 3rd, I really can't do it, you know, quickly. It's just a guess. I'm really just guessing. So those are some things that I'm working on right now. And some days I ask myself, why did I decide to start learning violin? Why did it seem so thrilling and irresistible when, you know, it's something quite different? Another thing that makes it less motivating to practice is when I'm I'm not plugged in. And electric violins that aren't plugged in, or at least this brand, it sounds awful. It sounds absolutely awful. And if you're also pitchy and off tune, it's even worse. So I figured out a long time ago, maybe like a year ago, that I would find it more motivating if I just plugged in every time. But, you know, depending, like if it's late and I'm tired, you know, one factor is, do I really want to take the time to plug it in? Do I want to make sure that I've got a battery here, you know, and I've got the thing, because these are these nasty old, whatever they're called, these rectangular 9-volt batteries, and they die if you leave it running. And then plus I got to adjust the settings on my amp, because when I use it with my guitar, a lot of time I crank up the distortion, and distortion with violin just sounds absolutely awful. But it definitely is more motivating if it sounds like a musical instrument instead of sounding like somebody scratching a chalkboard or something, you know. Yeah, and then it gets worse. The lower two strings are the hardest to do with vibrato, which is what everyone says. It's not just me. So, well, that's it. So now I'm just gonna play a little piece and call it good. I'm just gonna play some D major and G and something else.